Body count.
In your future, it looks like you'll kiss 7 girls.
If you can manage to make it past step 1 in today's dating world, this is one of the first problems you might run into. Casual conversation with your date, and they ask, "What's your body count?" That being, how many sexual partners have you had? It can be an intimidating question, especially if the answer is very high or extremely low. People today just seem to be obsessed with numbers when it comes to finding a life partner. How big is it? How tall are you?
You want to see my genitals? That's not okay.
How many encounters have you had? So you'd assume, by the way I'm introducing this idea to you, that it's for sure a bad question to ask, right? Surely, the answer to this problem is to just never ask the question. Video done. But it's more nuanced than that. There's a reason the question of sexual experience is so common on first and second dates. This video will be a bit different than past videos. Instead of doing research and forming an opinion on that, we're going to approach this question like a debate.
Biden, blast!
Because, spoiler alert, there's good research on both sides, shockingly. Don't worry, we'll do our best to remove biases from this one. Also, quick note, my voice is different because I am incredibly sick. I apologize. So, let's begin. So, what is that bias that I want removed so badly? Well, I have the bias of a straight, cisgender man raised in a semi-conservative household in a Catholic school, where, in that school, I was taught that a body count over 1 was a very bad thing. I'm telling you this so you have context for what I say. If bias starts to creep in through my tone, then you know the context at least. And as for my initial opinion on this topic, here's what I think. If I were to ask a potential partner what their body count was, it would be as a way to find out if they're leaving relationships after the excitement of sex dropped off. Not because I think someone's body is ruined or anything. If anything, the more experienced they are, the better the sex will probably be. Generally speaking, there's better ways to tell if they're only in it for the sex than just their body counts. Everything else should be a tip-off. Their priorities, how they treat their partners, how they treat you in general, etc. That's how I feel at the start of this, but it's subject to change. So, for this topic, we should first establish what body counts are and what the average is. Source number 1. UK-based health retailer Superdrug conducted a survey of about 2,000 Americans and Europeans in 2019, finding that women, on average, had 7 partners in their lifetime, and men had 6.4. Both genders agreed that about 7.5 was the optimal number for a single person. Great, so let's start there. Source 2. The CDC's latest data says that stateside, the median number for women is 4.3, and for men, it's 6.3. So, which is it? Seriously, I'm kinda confused here. Well, to put it bluntly, every source you look at will tell you something completely different. Some say it's more for men, some say it's more for women. All of this on top of the fact that Louisiana residents reported a lifetime body count average of 15.7 partners, but residents of Utah reported about 2.6, where there's a higher Mormon population and therefore more one-timers. Unlike penis size, this is a problem that absolutely does drastically change depending on the region. According to source number 1, the CDC's data also shows that 12.9% of women between 25 and 49 and 28.3% of men in that same age range have had 15 or more partners, while 17.7% of women and 11.2% of men in that age range have had just 1. So there's really more room for variation than 4.3 and 6.3 or 7 and 6.4 might lead you to believe. One last variable to throw onto the pile. Some men like to brag, and more importantly, some men love to lie. So you're gonna have a few men giving numbers which are outrageously higher than what's actually true, skewing these figures even more. Gee, where have I heard this before? Clearly, the numbers get a bit murky here, especially when you're self-reporting. And at some point, you have to just stop looking at numbers because you're just gonna drive yourself crazy. Keep that in mind as we continue on. We won't be focusing too much on the numbers like we do in size-related videos. Here, we'll be discussing social behaviors and broad scope ideas. We'll begin with the argument for why body count should not matter. Let's get one thing straight. Having a high body count does not mean you've been quote-unquote used. Not only is it not true, but it's seriously hurtful. This kind of language is just incredibly damaging. Contrary to what your abstinence-only Catholic school taught you, sex is as natural as breathing. And while not everyone feels the need to do it, doing it more than someone else does not degrade you. So why even feel the need to ask? Even if you do end up asking, the answer you're going to receive might be incredibly vague anyway. Let me ask you this. What does the term body count mean to you? The number of sexual partners you've had over the course of your life?
You fool!
Because others would say that it's the number of times you've had sex. Total. Well, that's certainly a different figure. So are we talking about the number of sexual encounters? Sexual partners? If you had a count of 30 one-time hookups, you would still have less sex than someone with one committed partner who had sex once a week over the course of an entire year. And if you want to get really crazy, definitions of what sex even is varies from person to person. Does someone you've had oral sex with get added to your body count list? What about anal sex? Does that count?
Want to see my butthole?
What about group sex? If you're in a foursome, but you don't touch one of the participants, are they on the list? Because you have to remember, monogamy is not the blueprint everywhere. And it's not for every couple. I guess then it wouldn't even be called a couple, it'd be a throuple or a quadruple. It may be the most popular, but the numbers get more and more confusing the more you start breaking the actual question down. This is why, before you go judging someone for their history, remember that you're hearing all of it without context. As someone who was raised Catholic, we were taught that sex constituted any sexual activity. A blowjob is sex under this broad definition, but not everyone agrees. Okay, so the answer you get will be confusing anyway. So what? There's a lot of reasons someone would ask what another person's body count is. One particular reason someone would cite when trying to justify asking the question is STIs. And you know what? Good on you for taking your health into account. Like genuinely, STIs are indeed a risk when engaging in any kind of sexual activity. But is it enough of a reason to ask and judge someone for their body count? The unfortunate truth is, even someone with only one sexual partner can get an STI or STD if that sex is unprotected. Yep, just because someone has had a lot of sex does not necessarily mean they have an STI or are at a greater risk for an STI. The number of times I go outside does not raise my risk of getting a cold. The number of times I go outside without a jacket does raise my risk of getting a cold. Of course, taking precautions when you're with someone new isn't a bad thing at all, but your focus is in the wrong place. It's more about how conscious they are of protection. Perhaps a better question than what's your body count is what's your thoughts on protection? If your primary reason for asking their count is to see if they might have an STI, then why not just ask them directly? Ask them, do you typically use protection? That should give you a pretty clear-cut answer as to their risk for an STI. Another big reason one might ask for the other's body count is because of their own insecurities. As someone who has yet to have sex, I know I would probably be a bit embarrassed to admit to a potential partner that, yes, it is my first time. It's hard to admit you don't know what you're doing, especially when it comes to something as personal and as intimate as sex. And you're not alone in that. A lot of first-timers will be embarrassed that their partner is more experienced than them, no matter your identity or orientation. But remember, a good partner will always be patient with you. A lot of people forget that a relationship isn't just about the sex. Maybe you don't know anything about sex, but maybe they don't know anything about cooking, and you're really good at cooking, which arguably has just about as much relevance in a partnership. It's fine if you're not experienced, that's the whole point of learning. Also, every person wants and prefers different positions, different stimulations, whatever. So even if you've had 7 partners,
7 girls.
when you sleep with someone new, you're sort of both starting from square one. They might be better at predicting what their partner likes, but a prediction is just that, a prediction. There's always a learning curve, no matter how experienced they are. On the topic of starting from square one, let's mention this other thing. The number of sexual partners you've had does not define your worth as a person. Well put by this article, the number of past sexual or romantic partners a person has had has nothing to do with their value or worth as a person. A person's body count doesn't predict how they will treat their current partner or behave in a committed relationship. While past sexual experiences, like any life experience, may shape who a person is, they're not relevant to the current relationship. Again, a new relationship is like starting from square one. Assuming you're not only in it for the sex, you shouldn't see your partner as less valuable just because they've had sex. We should also talk about a certain double standard that does exist. Men can have high body counts and women can't. At least, women are judged far more for having a higher body count than men, typically. Now, I'm aware that a large chunk of my audience are men, and you're sick of being told that everything is your fault. You built the world and you need to change, bucko. Well, good news, because this double standard is not your fault. I mean, let's be real, rarely are double standards anyone's fault. Society's fault, more like, but I digress. Many studies have shown that female-identifying individuals are much more likely to be judged for a high body count compared to males. Although that's not to say men are never judged for having a high body count. Men who have a lot of sexual partners are typically viewed by other men as dominant, studly, or accomplished. Meanwhile, women with the same thing are slut-shamed. This isn't to start a race to see who can be the biggest victim, but it is worth calling out that for some reason, this balance has not been fixed by the sexual revolution. Almost like it didn't really work, And our modern generation of women are still calling each other sluts. Conversely, women who have very low body counts are often negatively thought as prudish or inexperienced. So if you're a woman, you might be left kinda confused as to what you're supposed to do. I'm sure this is something a lot of women will agree with. It's something I've seen personally. You're sexually active, you're a slut. You're not sexually active, you're a prude. Seems like people are trying to put other people into clearly defined boxes. You need to be having exactly this much sex, no more, no less. The concept of body count has historically been used to shame and judge women without any scientific, psychological, or health-based reasoning. Ask someone, men or women or whoever, why they would slut shame anyone, and their reasoning often just boils down to, they're gross. This isn't 5th grade, grow up. See that bias starting to creep in again. Alright, I apologize. In any case, that is not a strong argument. They're gross. It's also important to note that most research about the average number of sex partners completely excludes the LGBTQ community, making body count irrelevant or more nuanced for those people. I think that's a pretty compelling argument for why body counts shouldn't matter. Now that we've thoroughly gone through that argument, let's look at the opposing side. Why body counts do matter. Yeah, I'm really gonna bake your noodle when the voice you've been hearing completely changes sides. Look, it's a complex issue, and it would be foolish of me to not address some of these counterpoints. Number 1, we've found a link between sociosexuality and infidelity. According to this source, there's a link between sociosexuality, meaning the desire for sex in the absence of commitment, and infidelity, meaning cheating. A prospective partner's sexual history could have given insight into their ability and willingness to settle down. At the start of this video, I told you we'd be talking about behaviors, rather than numbers. While someone having lots of sex in the past will not affect them physically, it may affect them behaviorally. It's one of the fundamental rules of human behavior. You use your past experiences to form your decisions in the present. This doesn't necessarily override the point we made earlier. People have past experiences and they can become new people, but those scars still remain. And whether or not those scars are big enough to affect your current relationship, even if you don't notice it right now, it might come out years down the line, remains to be seen. This is also true for the other end of the spectrum. Having absolutely zero past partners may signal to someone that you are inexperienced with relationships in general, which could make for a bumpy ride as they try to catch you up to speed. It is, unfortunately, just human nature to seek out those with more experience and this kind of environment. The patience and time commitment just might not be worth it to some people, as sad as that is. It might also reflect a lack of desirability in the eyes of others. A clue that, for whatever reason, committing to that person might be a bad deal with long-term reproductive consequences. For example, if someone has had no sexual partners in the past, there's a possibility that there's something about their behavior that has been so off-putting to those past dates. Not saying that's always true, of course, but subconsciously, that idea might have been put into your head after they tell you they haven't had sex at all. You start thinking, maybe there's something wrong with this person? Maybe, in their past relationships when they requested sex, they wanted to do something that would hurt their partner, and they were therefore rejected? Asking a partner their body count again gets into the realm of preferences. And this one is even trickier, because it's something that's usually in the individual's control. We have yet to make a video seriously dedicated to that idea of preferences, but if you're someone who defends the idea that rejecting someone based off your preference alone is okay, then you can't get upset if your date asks you your body count, because they might just have a preference for someone with a particular sexual history. You can't have it both ways. And unlike penis size, body count is something that you can largely control, minus, of course, the unfortunate cases of abuse. On top of this, promiscuity is associated with some mental health issues. Chief among these are bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder. Some people are just wired differently. No system of dopamine receptors is the same, and someone who's been putting sex as a high priority in their life might not be prioritizing other things in the relationship, like financial stability or tending to their own partner's needs. This seems like as good a reason as any to inquire about someone's sexual past. It might signal to you that they're not good partner material. A lot of people make the mistake of only focusing on their own pleasure in the relationship, and a lot of sex strung out over a short period of time with several partners could be a potential sign that they've been bouncing from short-term partner to short-term partner without regard to the other person's wants. As an added risk, someone like that probably won't be prioritizing protection, putting them at an increased risk for STDs. While the actual answer given to the body count question might be missing some important context, the number being high at all might be correlated with certain behaviors that signal unstable relationships. On that point, there has been a positive correlation between promiscuity and a propensity to cheat later in life. As this article puts it, as it relates to sexual history later in life, promiscuity is linked to a higher likelihood of cheating in long-term, serious relationships. We think the reason may be that many promiscuous people aren't really built for monogamy. Still, the vast majority of people, promiscuous or not promiscuous, do want long-term, committed, loving relationships. There's a very small percentage of people who don't. If your partner just doesn't seem to handle monogamous relationships very well, and that's the relationship model you prefer, then asking for a body count could simply be a way of assessing your compatibility, which is what dating is all about after all. Body counts do seem to be a predictor of certain behaviors later in life, because someone's past behavior will have an effect on how they treat relationships going forward. Now that we've covered both sides, let's discuss the potential weaknesses in each argument. First off, the body counts do not matter resources were found by me with the current Google search engine, which has become less reliable over the years. There's a convenience bias in my research there. On the other side, however, the body counts do matter resources did not have the full studies available, only the abstracts. Also, about half of the information presented here came from one source. In fact, almost all of the sources for the opposing argument came from one user on a Reddit thread who was very serious about proving his point on why they do matter, and why you should be able to ask someone for their count. I went through his exhaustive list of sources, and not all of them were up to snuff, some of them were a bit too old, but others seemed legit, and those were the sources that I decided to use for this video. So, who's right here? Honestly, I started this video leaning to the side of don't ask and it doesn't matter. Then again, the whole point of dating is to find someone who's a good match for you, so disregarding the entire question seems kind of irresponsible, as our problems with it largely stem from the judgment the question itself holds, which conflicts with the information that is gained from asking the question. So it's a necessary evil? That hardly seems like a satisfying answer. Damn it, it all comes back to preferences, doesn't it? Can't someone just ask out of preference? Of course they can. I don't have control over their lives. I'm not their babysitter. It's not illegal to have a preference, but just because you can doesn't mean that you should. When you ask right away, you're creating a relationship built on insecurity and a lack of trust. So seriously, what's the right answer here? Well, I think I've found a really good middle ground actually. And the answer comes from an unlikely place. Psychology Today, a source that can lack certain credibilities from time to time, as you guys have rightfully pointed out to me, which is why I've largely moved away from using it as a source. But today, it's gonna come in clutch because I found an article that might be able to give us a satisfying compromise to these questions. Does body count matter? And are you justified in asking your date what their count actually is? Because I think this answer is very nuanced in how it approaches this topic. I'm going to read you most of this article straight out. This is coming from Senior Lecturer of Psychology at Swansea University, Andrew Thomas, PhD. The discourse surrounding body count is often one-dimensional, focusing solely on numbers. There is another crucial, overlooked dimension that can add nuance: time. In a previous post, I explored the idea of body count and why paying attention to a partner's sexual history might have a protective function, reducing the risk of infidelity, contracting STDs, and choosing a partner who struggles to commit. All points that we've addressed in this video. You're on a third date with someone you find attractive, hoping to pursue a long-term relationship with them. Over the course of the evening, the subject of past relationships comes up. They reveal that they have had 12 sexual partners in the past. Instantly, you form an impression of them, based on this number alone. What would that impression be for you? Later into the evening, you learn that most of those relationships happened when they were much younger, a period marked by self-discovery and exploration. Since then, they've only had 2 long-term relationships, lasting several years. How does this new information reshape your initial impression? Notice what happens if we tweak the script. Later into the evening, you learn that most of those relationships happened within the last 6 months. Before that, they had only 2 long-term relationships, each lasting several years. What would you be thinking now? Impressions can dramatically shift when, and perhaps with good reason. When someone's sexual history is skewed towards the present, risk increases accordingly. There might be high levels of competition with recent partners hanging around, STDs might be present but not yet known, or, if possible, treated, and the suitor might be more interested in rebound flings than commitment, making them less in line with your goal of settling down. But these risks are alleviated when sexual history is skewed towards the past, competitors are long gone, STD status is more likely to be known, and their interest in keeping things casual may have waned. As an illustration, I recently asked almost 900 of my followers on Twitter who they would rather take on a date. Someone with 36 past partners, person A, or 12 past partners, person B. The catch? The bulk of person A's sexual history was confined to the past, while most of person B's sexual history happened recently. The results were interesting. People were 3 times more likely to pick person A. Most people would be more willing to date someone with 3 times as many previous partners, provided those experiences were well behind them. A poll on Twitter is one thing, but we've actually been working on a series of large-scale academic research studies on this phenomenon. From over 5,000 participants across 11 countries, we asked people to what extent they'd entertain a long-term committed relationship with someone based on their number of previous sexual partners, 4, 12, or 36. Importantly, we asked them several times for each number, displaying when these happened in someone's sexual history ranging from very present-heavy to equally spaced to past-heavy. As a spoiler, I can share a bottom-line result with you. Overall, past partner number matters, but as you can see, forgiveness effects are very real. For instance, the willingness to date someone with 12 past partners concentrated in the present is similar to the willingness to date someone with 36 partners confined to the distant past. Interestingly, we found very little in the way of sex differences, including a lack of sexual double standards. This surprised me because of what we covered earlier in the video. This study seems to contradict that. Women weren't judged more harshly for their sexual history than men. We did find some influence of mating strategy, however. Those with a more unrestricted sociosexuality score, people willing to engage in sexual activity outside of a committed relationship, were more willing to date those with richer sexual histories. If you're looking for a short-term fling, a partner with an adventurous present might seem more appealing, offering easy sexual access. Conversely, if you're looking for a long-term relationship, a past full of adventures, but a present marked by stability could be more effective. However, it is important to note that this forgiveness has its limits. Our data show curvilinear trends. Beyond a certain point, no further passage of time into the past can mitigate the perceived impact of a high number of partners. Understanding the historical context of past relationships offers a more comprehensive perspective on someone's sexual history. The risks associated with past sexual history are not equal across time, and this added dimension can lead to more informed and perhaps less judgmental perspectives on sexual history. It ain't what you did, it's when you did it. In that study, there seems to be a correlation between number of partners and time. In order to be forgiven by a potential partner for a body count, that count must go down, or time must increase. The study also found that the double standard we previously covered was shown to be largely untrue. As stated previously, women were not judged more harshly than men. Honestly, thinking back to my personal experience, heterosexual women don't seem to be judged by other men for their number of partners, only other heterosexual women. I think the idea that men will judge you for having a high body count is something that's largely been left in the past, at least here in the Western world. Other women will use the term slut as a way to degrade other women, but this is just a learned offensive move that hasn't quite gone away yet. Men, though? I can't speak for everybody, of course, but even the worst men I've talked to just haven't really shown interest in using that kind of insult. For a lot of guys, you might be insecure and embarrassed that she has more experience than you, but then you quickly realize that probably just means she's good at sex, which will probably make your sex with her even better. Selfish? Absolutely. But he won't be allowing her sexual past to influence his decision on continuing the relationship. Now, I do gotta call out myself here. You may have some guys who will write her off as not wife material, just like some girls in heterosexual relationships will write off adventurous guys as not husband material. I do recognize that is still there. But as far as a broad pattern goes, I think most men are just going to take that information and interpret it as, ooh, I'm going to get better sex. I think Thomas's answer ultimately does a really good job of satisfying both camps. You can ask, but remember that a simple number response won't give you the full information. So you should ask for more information. Show interest. Past sexual experiences can affect how they approach new ones, but the only way I see them reacting negatively in the present is if they had bad partners in the past. If this is the case, you should take time to help them work through their insecurities, and try not to be judgmental. The same information that would be used to fuel your jealousy can actually be hints at how to improve your skills in bed with her. She will likely appreciate you wanting to talk about her rather than yourself, and you'll get to know her likes and dislikes. In any case, whether or not you decide to ask your partner their body count, respect their decision if they don't want to answer, and if they do, make sure you're not asking out of a fear that you won't be able to measure up in some way. Everybody's different, and everybody has the capacity to change. A simple number should not come between you and happiness. That was a lot, and if you're like me, your head's spinning from everything I just threw at you. Also, my voice is absolutely thrashed. This video might be one to watch a few times over just so you have time to absorb all the information and make a decision on where you land in this argument. Honestly, I really like Thomas's idea of yes, it matters, and you should be allowed to ask, but don't use it to make an ultimate decision on your partner, because you aren't them and you don't know their story. Time changes people in ways you'll never know. So, let me know in the comments what you think of all this. I'm eager to read what you guys think. And full disclosure, I don't read every single comment anymore. I gotta take priority with my mental health, and some of those comments are just not good. But I do occasionally read the nice comment, so I do still want to have some interaction with you guys. But I wanted to be transparent in the fact that I don't read every single comment anymore. I just couldn't do it. In the meantime, though, we have a Discord. It's also a place where you can share your art and receive a lot of respectful critiques and art tips. I've been seeing a lot of that on there recently. We also have the Instagram, Lavender Paints 1, where I occasionally post new, safer work art of candles, as well as my other OCs. So you can follow me there if you're interested. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna go to sleep now. I love you all. Good night.